Miroku. At first glance, Miroku appears to be, well, a complete and total degenerate. He lies, he cheats, he steals. A reoccurring theme throughout the series is Miroku pretending that a castle or something is possessed by demons, and then using it to extract at least a night's lodgings and a feast out of the people who own it. He normally finds the nicest house in town, tells them they have demons, and takes a night's lodgings and maybe some money in exchange for cleansing it. Now, it should be noted that he does actually possess immense spiritual powers, even though the majority of his spiritual powers go to repressing the wind tunnel to prevent it from killing him. Um, Unfortunately, despite the fact that his powers are restrained, the charms he makes are still powerful enough to keep demons away. So if they leave the charms up, there's really no reason why they wouldn't ward off demons in the future. So even if he does do it in kind of a goofy way, who's to say that at some point they won't ward off evil spirits? It's not like the world of Inuyasha is really lacking in random evil spirits that attack people. They're practically everywhere. So is Miroku really that big a fraud? It's an interesting question. There's also the issue of his thing with women and alcohol and all his other vices. I find a lot of times in anime, particularly in animes of this type, womanizing and kind of alcohol are used to kind of show internal pain. And I think it's a very important aspect of Miroku, and I kind of compare him to Jiraiya in a lot of points. Both are kind of forlorn characters who have kind of accepted that they're going to be failures. Miroku has more or less accepted the fact that one day he will die, one day very soon, as the wind tunnel basically cracks open and devours him. Much like Jiraiya has more or less kind of come to the conclusion that he's a loser and that he'll always be a loser, and that he's failed at everything that matters in his life, winning the love of the woman, winning the love of Tsunade, saving his student, saving his best friend, that he's basically failed at everything he can fail at. And Miroku's a bit like that. And I think to a large extent his kind of obsession with women is kind of the way that he tries to hide his pain. Um, I find it interesting. I don't think we ever actually see him sleeping with a woman. That could just be because the show is too low rated. But it'd be interesting to know if he's actually ever had sex with a woman, or how many there have, or if it's just something he does to kind of distract himself from his sense of impending doom. Now, whether or not he actually wants to have a child to carry on the legacy and eventually defeat Naraku is an interesting question. Because he more or less gets that with Sango. I think if he had have asked Sango, will you have a child with me before we defeat Naraku so that he can avenge me, she probably would have said yes, or at least kind of considered it. But it's interesting that he doesn't ask that of her. If anything, he kind of says, when this is over, then we'll have children together, and then we'll live as man and wife. But he doesn't really try to seduce her further. He doesn't really try to sleep with her. He doesn't really try to do anything kind of beyond what had kind of existed before, I guess you could say. So that's kind of the interesting thing about Miroku. When he finally kind of gets into a situation to kind of resolve his sexual frustrations and whatever, he does not take it, and instead he more or less just kind of acts like a gentleman towards Sango, and more or less basically says they're going to wait for marriage to have sex and have children, which is kind of contrary to what he does for the rest of the series. As I said, my best guess is that Miroku really isn't nearly as he's probably has a very healthy sex drive. He's probably horny almost constantly, and he's probably very attracted to Sango. But I kind of think a lot of it is his way of dealing with his angst at his impending doom. It's also probably a way to drive people away from him. If he's abrasive towards people, if he gropes the women around him, then they'll hate him. Then they will not get close to him. It alienates both the men and women around him, and it means that no one will ever love him and no one will ever care about him. And because he believes that he'll die soon, he really doesn't want to leave anyone behind grieving. I think that's part of the reason why he won't marry Sango before Naraku dies, because he truly loves her, and he doesn't want to leave her alone with a child, which would make it a lot harder for her to remarry. Upon kind of realizing that he's going to die, he encourages Songo to marry a prince who proposed to her, believing that she could live a happy life with him away from their constant warfare. That alone, I think, kind of indicates he's a much more selfless man than is kind of the first glance. As I said, there's no doubt that Miroku probably has a very high sex drive, but to a certain extent, I think kind of beneath that is a sensitive man, a loving man, and fundamentally a good man who's just in a lot of pain. Seeing his father die, living with impending doom, having to kill a demon that he can't even really hope to hurt, let alone destroy, is very very difficult on him. And I don't know. I don't really have too much else to say. I think that kind of summarizes my view of Miroku. I think you kind of have to look underneath the underneath with him and try to see what's motivating his character. It's very easy to kind of just dismiss him as a pervert without trying to kind of psychoanalyze what is the real reason for this. Because he does a lot of stuff kind of contrary to the narrative, I guess you could say, that he's just a stupid pervert that has to be taken seriously. Um, so that's my thoughts on Miroku. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is, as always, Argent. I'll talk to you later.